Hi, I'm Lucy. Welcome to this Blossom and Friday video tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make your very own elephant doll, and I'll be referring to a few previous clips as well. So I hope you enjoy the tutorials. Pause when you need to, take your time and enjoy the process. So to start out you'll need to print out your two sheets, and I'm going to cut the relevant pieces out that I need for the pattern. I have my fabric here for my elephant doll, and refer to the printable guide to show you the measurements that you need, but I'm using a fat quarter, which is more than enough and probably leave me some spare for a later project. Make sure when you're cutting that your fabric, the stretch in your fabric, is vertically running. So I'm going to place the pattern pieces this way. I mean, obviously there is a bit of stretch in this fabric that way as well, but it's nowhere near as much as this way. And it helps so that when you're stuffing, if you're stuffing the legs and the stretch is this way a little bit more, then it just makes for a slightly longer leg. Whereas if the stretch is this way, you're going to get lumps and bumps in the width of the leg. So make sure it's on the vertical. And I'm going to place here, making sure I leave room for the seam allowance all the way around, and I'm going to pin and mark both pieces. I'm going to then flip that over and mark on the opposite side. Now, as you can see here, I've held this up to the window and I've replicated the marks on that side for the arms so that I make sure that I mark them out too. So I'm going to pin and mark both pieces, leaving room for seam allowance. Now, just a note for those of you eagle-eyed watchers, I am using a friction pen here, a gel pen. Now, there's a bit of debate online about how good these are for sewing and whether the marks come away. I've never had any trouble with them. They come away with the iron, but I know some people have experienced sort of ghost marks appearing afterwards. So do use your favourite sewing pen and make sure that it doesn't leave any marks. I'm using this now because it is, I must admit, it is easy for going around these tiny corners, but it's really to show you through video. It's nice and clear. Now, when you're marking around the trunk, make sure your line is really nice and clear and precise, because it will really help you when you're sewing. So I'm leaving enough room here to make sure I've got the seam allowance of about 5 to 10 millimeters. And on both of these and on the back pieces, it's really important you mark where the armholes are going to be, so that you don't forget and then sew over those. And now I'm going to do the back body pieces. I've got here lion's ear mark. Obviously you can ignore that. The elephant is made differently in that his or her ears are placed onto the body after it's sewn and stuffed. With the lion it's beforehand, so just ignore that. It's not relevant in this pattern. So again, I'm leaving enough room for seam allowance. I'm going to pin that into place. Now on the back body piece, you've got two gaps to remember. It's the arm gap, so you can insert the arms later, and there's this gap here which is used for stuffing. So I really exaggeratedly make a mark there, so I just remember when I'm sewing not to sew in this gap. So just ensure you do that on both sides. And so what I'm going to do on this piece is make sure that that mark comes through again, so I remember that, and then pin into place, and just again on the other side marking that gap because that is really important. So now I'm going to pin and mark four legs, 4 arm pieces and 4 elephant ear pieces. And just a reminder, if you're using a different fabric for the inner ear, you'll need 2 with the body fabric and 2 with the inner ear fabric. Because I'm doing the inner and outer ear the same, I'm going to make 4. So I've cut my elephant pieces for my doll. I've got 2 front body pieces facing opposite. Now you'll see I haven't cut underneath the trunk loop just yet. I've just cut the outline. I've cut an even, it's between 5mm and a centimetre, but it's even all the way round. And so once I've sewn around the trunk, then I'm going to trim up carefully into here. So I've got 2 front body pieces opposites, 2 back body pieces opposites. I've got 4 leg pieces. I have 4 arm pieces and 4 ear pieces, and I'll just show you they are 2 facing left, 2 facing right. And again, just to reiterate, these are all in the same fabric because the ears for my elephant are going to be the same for the inner ear and the outer ear. So if you're doing a different coloured inner ear, you obviously need 2 inner ear pieces that are a pair, that are one left, one right facing. And I have the felt cheeks. To mark around it. So with these little nail scissors, it is super handy. I'm going to cut very carefully. There we go, we have the 2 cheeks. So the first thing we're going to do is sew the felt cheeks on to each front body piece of the elephant. So you will need to, when you made your markings, they were on the wrong side. So I'm going to place this. This is now onto the correct side. So this is the correct side of the fabric, and just through that hole I'm going to mark a little dot for the cheek. And then onto the other side, onto the other front body piece, I'm going to then flip that, ensure it's correctly lined up, using lines if I need to, looking through, making sure that they're even, and I'm going to, using that hole again but in reverse, make another cheek mark. So now using a glue stick, a fabric glue stick or a pin, I'm going to place that centrally onto there. And what I do anyway, just as a precautionary measure, is place them both on the little marks that I've made and just check that both pieces look even. It is a little hard to tell at this stage, but if you've measured it, if you've lined up the fabric with the template piece correctly, they should be lined up fine. So I'm going to pin or fabric glue those into place. When I say fabric glue, I just mean my little glue stick, temporary glue stick. So I'm now going to sew the cheeks on. I'm going to take it to the machine and do a little stitch, and I'm going to use a previous tutorial section just to show you how to do that. And I'm going to start with a tiny back stitch. Now I recommend putting your sewing machine on the slowest setting and just doing very lightly, and then back stitch even one. So you're going to be turning the cheek literally 2 or 3 stitches at a time. So you keep the needle down, 2 or 3 stitches at a time, and then lift the foot, turn again a little tiny bit, and 2 or 3 stitches at a time, lift and turn. Go super, super slow. Just snip, and look, you can see I've sewn around the edge, a couple of millimeters in from the edge, all the way around in a small stitch. I'm going to repeat with the other side. And there we have the second cheek. So now we're going to piece together your arms and legs. So we're going to place 2 arm pieces right side facing, so you want your sewing marks on the outside. Make sure they're aligned. And pin into place. Repeat. And then you're going to do the same with the legs. So again, you've got the sewing mark there. You're going to turn it so that the correct side is facing inwards and place the corresponding one on top so that the right side is facing inwards. Line them up and pin. So you have your 2 leg pieces pinned together. And now you're going to sew around the edge. So start at the top, sew around here, take care in the corner, sew slowly on the curve around the edge and to the top. Do not sew across here. Now I'm going to use the turning tool. So place that in there. And just insert it at the end. And push. And there we have a little leg. I'm just going to neatly, carefully push out all the seams with the turning tool or with another implement like the eraser end of a pencil or a chopstick. And there we have a leg. I have the thinner one here for the little arm. I'm going to insert it and just be a little trickier with the arms. Just gently pull it through, making sure not to push too hard, otherwise it might pop through the end. And then press the seams out. There we go. So that is quite a thin little arm. If you don't have a turning tool, you can either use the hemostats and pull it through, or you can use a milkshake straw and a pencil, or I'll show you another way. So if you don't have a turning tool or hemostats, you can, I'm going to show you how you can turn. It's not as easy. It might take a little bit more time. So I've got here a pencil. I've just put a little bit of masking tape securely on the end just to avoid any graphite marks on any of the fabric. Got a milkshake straw, or you can do it with tweezers. So if you've got a milkshake straw, insert it into the leg as far down as it will go, and take your pencil and push it into the end of the straw. Try again. And just gently press it down and roll up the fabric until it comes through. Okay? And you can pull it through that way. And again, you can use the eraser end of the pencil to just gently push out all the seams. So if you don't have a turning tool or hemostats, what you can do is you can just use a pencil with an eraser. And I still have the masking tape on here just to protect from any graphite marks. And what you need to do is you need to push the leg so that it sort of comes apart, it comes open that way inside, if that makes, sense. So that you're pulling it apart, you're pulling the two sides apart at the end. Then place the rubber tip of the pencil into that, and then slowly push the fabric up the pencil. There we go. And just again with the eraser, just push the seams out. And you can do that with the arms. It is a little bit trickier with the arms. Just take your time and you'll manage it, no problem. So I'm going to show you how to stuff the arms and legs. So what I do is I get my stuffing and I break it into little pieces so it's ready to go. Take the leg to start with. Take one of the little pieces and push it into the top with my finger, and then I'm going to use the pencil with the eraser end to just push it down. And I'm going to just manipulate it so it goes right into that corner. So I'm going to really push the stuffing down. Be careful with the seams, but I really want to get that stuffing firmly packed and into the corner. And then I'm going to repeat one bit at a time. And again, pushing and manipulating that stuffing down. I really think this is the trick with stuffing. At first, when I sort of got into doll making, I'd find this really tricky. I just couldn't get the stuffing or the shape right. And I think it's just taking the time to kind of push it down and really manipulate it into the shape that you want. Can you see the shape there? It's pushed the outer edge there, and you can even, if you use a chopstick or the turning tool, I'll push it even more firmly up into that little corner. That's it. And I'm going to carry on stuffing little piece by piece until we get up to here. And then you can reference your pattern piece and stuff approximately up to that line. And we're nearly there. I think one more little bit of stuffing. You can see it's still a bit lumpy here, so I'll need to push it around and manipulate it a bit more. So one more little bit. And I'm really pushing that down. And now I'm just going to gently roll it. Just helps to even out the stuffing inside. Sometimes I do this, I pull it and sort of flex it a little bit, and it just evens out the stuffing inside. And again, I'm just going to push that top bit down. And there we have it. So one stuffed leg. So with the arms, stuffing is very similar. On the arm pattern, you have the stuffing guide. So if you want to mark that there, as long as both arms are even, it doesn't matter if it's slightly different, but you need to leave enough room to sew this into the body. So a little fiddlier stuffing in here. It's a bit more difficult to get your finger with the stuffing into the top. Again, I would, if you don't have the hemostats, I would use tweezers here and just to get it into that top bit. And then with your pencil or other implement, just push down to the end. And then really firmly push it to the tip, so that what happens is you push the seams out with the stuffing and you get this lovely rounded edge. So really firmly push that to the edge. And repeat. Make sure that top bit of stuffing is pushed nice and firmly down. And there we have our stuffed arm and stuffed leg. So make sure you repeat that so you've got 2 of each. So for the elephant's ears, you'll need to take a pair of opposite ears and right side fabric, so your markings are on the wrong side, the correct side fabric facing together, place them together so they're aligned, pin, and then I'm going to machine sew all the way around this edge with a nice small stitch, leaving this part open. So I'm just going to sew from here all the way around and then just leave this open. And you might want to just back stitch on the open edge just to secure it, because you're going to turn it inside out. And then so you're going to stitch all the way around here at the outer edge, maybe back stitch at each edge just to strengthen it, and then repeat with the other ear. Got my 2 front body pieces for my elephant, and the cheeks are sewn into place. I'm going to face these 2 together, correct sides facing, and really make sure that they're aligned, and I'm going to pin all over just to keep it really securely into place. So to sew the front body piece of the elephant, what I'm going to do is I'm not sewing this bit for now, so don't sew anything up here, this is in a later step. We're just sewing the front line, so just this front line, and it is a little bit fiddly, so really take your time. You want a small stitch, start right up here and just follow it round ever so carefully, take your time, lift the foot with the needle down so that you can really get those curves, and sew all the way around there. And then I would recommend, once you've done that all the way around down to here, don't sew around the edges here, don't sew here and don't sew here, just this front line around the trunk. I would recommend you do again over the top, especially paying attention to here, because there's going to be quite a bit of pressure on here when you turn it the other way around and stuff it. So I would double or triple stitch around here. I'm going to take that to the machine now and take my time to do that, and I'll come back and show you the next step. So with the back body for the elephant, I've got the two pieces here with my markings on the wrong side. So I want to place them correct sides together, really line those up, pin into place. I'm going to pin that a little bit more along there, and then I'm going to take it to the machine and sew up here, making sure to leave this gap. Don't sew there. So a little back stitch here to strengthen that gap, little back stitch here and all the way up. Don't sew around the edges, that's for later. Just this line, just the spine. Okay, so I've got my elephant ears that are sewn around here, and I'm just going to trim a little closer to the stitch, just so it's easier to turn and to press out the seams. Just a little bit closer, just especially on those curves. And then I'm going to turn this inside out. It's very easy to do using my wooden tool, or you could use your chopstick or pencil, you know, the eraser end of a pencil. Just push that out so you get that shape really nicely all the way around. And I'm going to take that to the iron and press it flat. Once the ears pressed flat, we now need to just tuck in this open end. So what I do is just fold the edges under, pull it slightly taut, and then just press that down. You don't want to go too much inwards. I'd say between 0.5 centimetre and 1 centimetre, so you still have that the curve, you still have that outside line of the elephant's ear. And again, press that flat with the iron, and then I'm just going to sew one line of stitch up here just to close it all the way up to the top in a pale cotton. And I'm going to repeat with the other ear. So I've sewn around the elephant's trunk, really paying attention inside this corner. I've actually sewn 2 or 3 times in there, because when as you can see, I've cut that part now, and you need to cut quite close. So you need to really make sure that these lines are reinforced with 3, maybe 2 or 3 lines of stitching. And I've trimmed right up into here. I've used my pinking shears just to get a couple of notches in there and try to get quite close to that little corner. Not too close, but close-ish. And then what you need to do is open it up and turn the trunk right side out. I'm actually going to use the turning tool for that. I'm just going to trim a bit of this excess around there, and I'm going to use the turning tool to turn that the correct way round. And then I'm just pushing out the seams from the inside. And with my fingers, I'm just going to, don't want to put too much strain on this central seam and that bit under the trunk, but I'm just going to press this central seam down with my fingers. And I'm going to try and do it here as best I can. So I'm just pushing that down with my fingers. Okay, so there you have the little trunk. So you have your 2 front body pieces here for your elephant. Now he is different from every other pattern of mine so far in that you add his ears when he's complete and when he's stuffed. So you don't need to consider that at the moment. But what you do need to do is stuff his trunk, because it's just harder to do when he's the wrong side out. Sorry, when he's right side out and finished. So I'm just going to carefully a tiny bit at a time. And just with my stuffing tool, you can use a chopstick or the eraser end of a pencil, just push it down into the trunk. And I'm not going to, you don't need to put too much in here, but just enough that so when he's the right side out and you start to stuff him, that the stuffing from the trunk meets the main stuffing in the body. So you can see here the stuffing now, I've pushed it down and it's visible. So I'm going to leave it at that, otherwise it just makes it harder to sew together. So just try and push it in quite firmly. And then with the correct sides of the fabric together, so his front body piece and the back body piece, the correct sides together, I'm going to start by pinning, by placing these two central seams at the top, making sure they're aligned, and pinning there first. And then go around the edge, making sure that those marks are aligned, and that you'll see when you get around to here, I'm just making sure that the neck is aligned. My seam allowance that I did is very even, so I know as long as the two body pieces are aligned, then I'm on the right track. But it can be fiddly, just take your time. And I'm going to keep pinning all the way around. So there's the elephant, pinned all the way around, so it's nice and aligned with the stuffed trunk. And what I'm going to do now is take it to the machine and I'm going to sew all the way around. So I'm going to back stitch here, sew up the line, back stitch at the arm, leave the gap. That's really important that you leave the gap and you make it nice and secure at each side. And then I'm going to stitch around. Now really pay attention to this part here around the neck. Keep that trunk sort of in the middle so that you can get your machine foot around it nicely. And then just sew all the way around. Keep that needle down, keep turning it, take your time, all the way around to here, back stitch, leave the gap for the arm, back stitch, and down to here, and finish with another back stitch. So I've sewn around the elephant. I'm removing pins. And I'm going to refer you to a previous tutorial just to show you how to insert the arms. So you have your two arms stuffed evenly to the same level, and you're going to insert it into the still inside out body piece. So you're going to take a safety pin and insert it into the top of the arms. You can do one at a time, or you can do two together. And what you're going to do is insert the safety pin end up through the body and out through one of the arm gaps. Just thread the safety pin through and gently pull it. Now when the top of the arm has come out, you need to push the arm inside so that it lies down the side. Okay, make sure the stuffing is not in the gap, that it's a nice flat piece of fabric where you're going to sew, and that the arm's got plenty of movement there, and you've got about 1 centimetre of arm outside of the top. And make sure it's flat, so you don't want to twist in the fabric here from the arm. You want to make sure that piece that's come through is nice and flat, lying flat in the body, in the gap. Okay, push that arm to the side. And I'm going to repeat with this. You can either sew and then repeat to match, but I'm going to do them both at the same time. So I've got the second arm through, and I'm going to again pull it to the side so that if you push that down, you can see that both arms are lying here. Now you need to make sure that they're even. So check that they're on the even level here, and again make sure that this piece that's come through is laying flat in the arm gap, so that when you sew over the top to go over that to make the gap close, that you're sewing onto the flat piece of the arm, not with a twist in it. Again, I'm just going to double check that they're even, push to the sides, and now I'm going to put it on the sewing machine and go over the arm gaps. So you're going to sew around here and slightly over the stitch you've already done, just to make sure it's nice and strong. You're going to sew over the arm gap and over here a little bit and back stitch. And then you're going to repeat that 2 or 3 times to really secure that arm in place. So I'm sewing with the needle down on a small stitch again, 1.5, and I'm going over the arm gap and the flattened arm in there. I'm going to back stitch. With the needle down, I'm then going to lift the foot and I'm going to twist the whole thing. Foot back down, and I'm going to go back over up until the neck curve. I'm going to lift the foot, twist it back round and repeat. I really want that arm to be very secure, so that if it's pulled or tugged, it's not going to come loose. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other side, but just before I do, I'm just going to double check again that this arm that I'm about to sew is even with the other one, that it hasn't slipped out of place. Place it, foot down, needle down, and back stitch. Now sometimes the foot has to ride over the stuffing a little bit, and as long as your arm isn't too close up, it will just sort of it will just go over it quite comfortably. Foot up, twist, foot down, one more time for good luck, and back stitch and lift. So I've sewn elephant's arms into place. His trunk is still stuffed, and I'm going to turn him right side out. So just start off by pulling those arms through, and then the trunk will then come through, and you can just gently push the head through there. Just take your time, and then you'll see this sort of funny earless little elephant come through. Take your eraser end of your pencil or turning tool and just carefully from the inside push out those seams. So this will really help to get a lovely round shape when you come to stuff him or her. And just push them gently all the way around. And so you can see, you can just give the stuffing in his trunk a bit of a push. There we go. So I'm going to show you via a tutorial, a previous tutorial I made, how to stuff the head. Exactly the same applies. It's how to get the shape round here. So if you follow along with that, his trunk's already stuffed. And then what I'll show you next is how to add the legs. Now obviously it's a different colour creature, but exactly the same applies. So if you follow on with that and how to stuff his body through here, then he'll be nearly finished. Now to stuff the head. So you'll be surprised how much stuffing can go into his head. We're only going to stuff his head for now, and then what we're going to do is add the legs and then stuff the remainder of the body from the back. But we're going to start with the head, and you can get your stuffing ready. You can be a bit more liberal this time, so you can put some quite big chunks in there and push in with the pencil. So get a few big-ish balls of stuffing in there, push them up, anywhere will do. And keep going. Again, I've got quite a lot of stuffing there. I'm going to just push it in. Now you'll see his base. It's a bit of a funny shape. Just persevere. It doesn't mean you've done it wrong. It just means that the stuffing's not in the right place yet. Right, so quite a bit of stuffing in there, sort of medium stuffed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up in there with the tool or the pencil with the eraser edge. Don't put a pointy edge in there. And again, I'm going to stuff and move that stuffing into the seams at the edge. And what I'm doing here is I'll show you on the outside as if I'm doing it. So the tool's going up inside, and some of the stuffing that's in the middle, I'm sort of manipulating it and moving it out to the edges like this, moving it out and pushing it against those edges, and doing the same down into this bit here where his neck is, ever so gently, just pushing it all around. Gently but firmly. And it takes a while to get that right. You really need to push it so that the outer shape starts to form. Don't worry about the middle being a bit squishy. The stuffing around the edge of his head should be becoming quite firm now. And then what I do when it's getting to this point is, again, manipulate the stuffing a little bit, push it down. And I'm just keeping on pushing outwards, pushing that stuffing that's inside upwards and outwards so that it's squishier in the middle and it's getting firmer around the edges. So you can see his head's really starting to take shape. He's a little bit squishy here still, but this edge is becoming nice and rounded, just like the pattern that you cut out and you've cut out and sewn. So keep manipulating. We're nearly there with stuffing the head. Just need to keep stuffing up and out. So don't be surprised if you're using a lot of stuffing for the head. It's definitely where the most part of the stuffing goes. The tummy's going to be a little bit squishier. So, and we're nearly there. So kept pushing upwards and out to get this shape here, the nice round shape. And when at first this bit's squishy and sort of empty, when it starts to fill up, you just need to gently push the stuffing up into this area, and then as it fills up more, just to here, so it's compact and even all over. Not as compact as the arms, probably. And again, this bit here, I'm going to show you to get this little bit around the cheeks. So So you need to sort of push the stuffing downwards to this bit as well to fill out this little crease. So you need to be gentle with it, but you need to get the stuffing tool up and sort of twist and push backwards. It's hard to show you with the tool inside, but I'm going to show you on the outside, so you kind of get the tool up and push back down here, push into that gap. Give him a bit of a squeeze, and I think he's nearly there. Yep, I'm happy with that little face. There we go. So you can see his shapes coming together nicely. So when you come to the point of stuffing, you've nearly stuffed the elephant's head, as I've just shown you with stuffing the other doll. But what you might find is I'm just going to give you a little bit of a guide on how to just get that trunk looking nice and even. So you just need to get the stick and just push a little bit more of that stuffing out and into the trunk so that it meets up with the stuffing that's already in there, and just kind of squash it down. It's very simple, to be honest. The elephant is surprisingly one of the easier ones to make, but you just need to kind of fiddle around till you get that stuffing looking right there. And then what I'm going to do is show you how to add the legs using the bunny template, exactly the same process applies. So add the elephant's legs, continue to follow the tutorial of stuffing the body and closing it, and then I will show you how to add the ears and embroider the eyes, so you've got a finished elephant. Now I'm going to add the legs. So what you're going to do is this piece here, you're going to fold it up a couple of centimetres, maybe 1.5 centimetres. Can you see I've folded it in on itself? I'd say that's 1.5 centimetres. And just pull apart, so you need to make sure the central seams meet and that it's sort of even. What you don't want is one side going up like this and one side down. So make sure the fold is a nice straight line and that it comes just even-ish with the arms, but probably the arms are a little bit longer. Nice and level. And then take it to the iron and press this flat. Got the legs here stuffed. Make sure the stuffing's nice and compact, that it's not sort of loose in this top bit, otherwise you'll end up sewing bits of stuffing. You want to make sure you've got your legs and that they're facing inwards. And place one here, place it up inside, make sure it's pushed against here in this corner. I'm going to pin that into place really firmly. So you can see the leg facing inwards, this one faces in that way. And again, I'm going to push this one into here and make sure that they're nice and lined up at the bottom. And again, make sure that's pushed into place and pinned really securely. I'm just going to take a minute to have a look and just check that the two pieces here are lined up. There's a little overlap there, but that doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do is machine sew, starting here. I'm going to do a little back stitch. Now your machine foot will ride over this a little bit, so you've got to really take your time here. And if you're not sure, you can always unpick, or what you could do is tack on a loose stitch and then sew over the top and then unpick the loose stitch, but it will ride over a little bit. What I do is start here, back stitch, Then I remove these pins as I go. So as the foot gets to here, I'll remove this pin and then keep sewing across here. And then what I do, with the needle down, I twist the whole thing around and sew the other way. So I'm going to show you that now. So I'm going to start sewing along here. Do a bit of a back stitch and then remove that pin and just sew all the way along. Now if you find that the stuffing does get under the foot a little, what I sometimes do is just lift the foot ever so slightly and sew. Obviously it means you lose a little bit of control of the, so you just need to go ever so slowly and just stitch all the way along. And then I'm removing the second pin and ensuring the legs are still aligned and straight. And sew all the way to the end. And then I'm going to lift the foot but not the needle. And I'm going to twist it round. And now this time it's a little bit easier. I'm just pushing that all through a little bit. I'm going to go follow over that seam, sorry, over the stitching from before. And back stitch. So as you can see, those legs are nicely stitched into place. They're nice and secure, they're even. Actually, I like them a little bit uneven. You can see that one's ever so slightly longer. And they're securely in there. The top of the leg, there's enough in there that it's stitched in properly. Got a little fold here, but that doesn't matter because it's all secure. Now we're going to stuff the body. To stuff the body, I'm going to use some big bits of stuffing. And to start off with, I'm going to push them down into these corners here. You don't need to use a pencil for this because you don't want it to be too compact. You want it to be nice and firmish, but on the cuddlier side rather than really heavily stuffed. You'll still be using plenty of stuffing. And then I'm going to take some and just push it gently up to the neck. I don't want it to affect the stuffing in the head too much. But it's going to go up towards there so that there isn't a big floppy thing here. You don't want the neck to be too firm, but you don't want it to be completely separate. So you need some stuffing coming up here touching the stuffing that's in the head. I'm going to use the pencil here. There, so the tummy's nice and compact, but not too firm, not as firm as the head. And then I'm going to do a ladder stitch on here to seal it up. So make sure the stuffing's nice and even. You're happy with that before you start to sew. Push all the stuffing in so there's no loose bits coming up. And we're going to do a ladder stitch. So to do the ladder stitch, I've got my needle and I've threaded some white cotton to match the body cotton, and it's double thread, so I've threaded it through and I've tied a knot in the end. Okay, I've actually tied 2 knots in there. So what I'm going to do is start by threading that through just through the top of the gap and making sure that that knot doesn't pull through. I'm going to push the end of the thread into there, and then I'm going to start the ladder stitch. So going across to the other side, just going to do a little stitch. You see coming out there. and then just gently pull it through. And then I'm going to go back over to the other side at the same height as that one, and again I'm going to repeat, do another little stitch down, keeping it nice and small, and just pull it across there and push the stuffing down. And I'm not pulling it too tight each time, so I'm going to create a little ladder. So I'm going to continue with little stitch across, little stitch down, across, little stitch, all the way down. So there, sewed all the way to the bottom. The stuffing's inside, some of it will probably peep out, but I can push it in. And then what I'm going to do is gently take this seam, what I'm going to do is gently take this thread and just pull it ever so gently but firmly. And the ladder will just come together and seal it up. And then I just do a little thread, a little stitch at the bottom, just to fill in that gap. And then I do a little knot, just looping that through. And then I just press the needle in, so it comes out there, and then I will just cut close to that fabric so the thread will disappear into the stuffing. So I'm just going to cut that there, and it's gone. You've got a nice little ladder stitch. There's a bit of stuffing come through, so I'll just trim that. And there we go. So I have my elephant doll. The back is sewn up and he or she's completely stuffed. And now I'm going to mark the eyes. I don't actually sew a mouth, embroider a mouth onto the elephant, because I just don't feel it's necessary. The eyes look lovely by themselves. So you can use your template, your face template guide, but it's different. If you're sewing the lion or any of the other dolls, it's quite precise. You can place that on there, but it just doesn't work out with the elephant. It's quite tricky to do. So what I would do is place the cheat guide on there and just play around with where you want the eyes placed. So just mark it. You can use that if you're doing a closed eye. You can use the template guide, the shape, but you're going to have to go a bit more freestyle with where you place it. So that's quite cute. And then you just need to make sure that they're symmetrical. So I'm going to repeat that on this side. Obviously it's quite a long way. I'm going to repeat that on this side. Obviously it's quite a long way from lining up with the central seam, so don't worry about that. And just on the reverse side of the face template guide, I'm marking that again. And then I just hold that up and I kind of look and see if I feel that they are symmetrical. Now I think that one's a bit lower down, so I'm just going to mark it. Just mark the two eyes, remove the fabric pen again if you need to, remark it and just till you get it right. But I'm happy with those, so I'm going to mark some little eyelash lines on them. I like quite long eyelashes on the elephant. Obviously you could do the open eye look as well, and the same would apply. You just line that up with the cheeks and just approximate where looks right. Use the open eye marker that's on here and mark it on there. And I'm going to show you how to embroider it by using a previous tutorial, because it's quite a good guide to show you, because it's a nice light fabric with a dark thread, and the light was better than it was today for me to film. So I'm going to show you that. Exactly the same applies of how to do it, whether you do open eye or closed eye, but just make sure you get that placement right before you sew. And then once you've done that, I'm going to show you how to add the ears. I'm going to embroider Mouse's eyes with this charcoal coloured thread, and I'm going to split that down to one single thread. There's 6 in there. I'm just going to take one out. It gives it a nice subtle line. That's why I like charcoal. It looks like a nice little pencil line. If you want to go darker, if you're using a darker body fabric, you know, use black or dark brown, but I'm using charcoal here in one thread. So I threaded that through the needle, and I'm going to embroider onto here. Now, I much prefer to embroider after the toys. So you don't need a knot at the end of the thread, just push that through somewhere around this side where you can still reach the eye, and then you come up just slightly into that curve, like one stitch into that curve of the eye, and pull it through, and then just leave a little bit of this thread there, and then you're just going to back stitch around that curve. So you just go back to the top of the curve, underneath the hole where it came out, and then a stitch length further along the curve, and then pull it through, and then back to where that last stitch ended, and back along the curve. Oops. And then just keep going along. And on that last stitch, when it comes out, just go back one stitch, and then under to the end of one of the eyelashes, out through the end of the eyelash, and then back down the length of the eyelash towards the curve. And then what I'm going to do is go back under so the stitch comes out at the end of one of the next eyelashes. I'm going to repeat that again until all the eyelashes are done. There we go. So I'm going to go up to the curve, back under towards the end of the last eyelash, pull it through, and then finished. And when I go through this one, I'm going to put it down into the curve, and I'm going to push it back out here and just gently pull, and then I'm just simply going to trim these 2 threads that are coming out away. Trim them close to the fabric, and then all you need to do is just push the fabric and they disappear inside. No knots required. There you have it, Mouse's little closed eye. So I'm going to do the same with the next one. If you want the open eye dots, again, line it up here so that the bottom of the template is on that line you made before, top of the nose lines up, and you can see here on the template guide there's a mark that says open eye. And just make a little mark there, and then I'm going to just dot that on the back so I know where it is on the reverse, and I'm going to do the reverse side, and again find that mark, just do a little dot, have a look and check that they're where you like them to be. You can move them around, you know, it's up to you, and then you're just going to do a slightly bigger circle there. So to do the open eye embroidery on the face, I'm going to show you on the bunny here. So you've made your marks, your dots. Now I'm using a charcoal embroidery thread, which is actually 6 individual threads, and what I'm going to do is just split it right down to 1. I'm just going to take one thread and just separate that. And with the embroidery needle, I'm just going to thread it through from a distance over here perhaps. If you've got a long doll needle, it's great because you can go right underneath and come out the other side. But here I'm just going to thread it through from here and just come up on the top of the circle, that tiny little circle. I'm just going to pull it through. Now you can leave a bit of that thread here and you can trim it later. And then I'm going to do another stitch just down around the circle. And I'm going to just follow it around. It's very fiddly and very small, but you'll get the hang of it. I'm just going to do a little circle around the edge just to get a nice neat circle. So I'm just doing a very simple back stitch, coming out there, going back to where it first went through. And now I'm just going to sew across, so from one side of the circle from the top out to the other side. Oops, not the ear caught. And back to the first side. So it's crossing, so the thread's crossing over and filling in that little circle. I'm just going to keep going so it's not overlapping. I don't want it to look too thick. That's why I like charcoal, because it looks like a little pencil line. It's not too, it just looks delicate. Nearly done. That's it. And then I'm just going to do the last stitch inwards, and I'm just going to push it out somewhere over here again and just pull it gently. Don't want to tug it too much because you'll create a little dent. So I'm just going to pull it there, and then I'm going to snip these threads, and if they're slightly sticking out still, I'm just going to push the stuffing and they disappear inside, and you've got one little open eye. And I'm going to repeat here. So take your 2 elephant ears, thinner end at the bottom and this more rounded edge at the top, and we're going to place them on the back of the head. Now they will curve round the back of the head, so you can pin them at the top and the bottom. Just stick the pin straight in, and mine follows the curve around the back of the head, so I'm happy with that. You might want it slightly higher or lower, and you can see it's a straight line on the back, and it's pinned up at the seam, and then it's pinned down here so that this curve at the bottom just lines up with the seam. But really it's up to you to play around with where you like it, and then do the same with the other one and make sure they're symmetrical. Pin into place. I mean, they don't need to be perfectly symmetrical, but roughly the same, roughly in the same place. I'm happy with that. And then I'm going to turn it around just to show you the back. We've got a few loose threads. So that's what the back looks like. You can pull that round, the centre round slightly if you want a more closed in ear look. And then, it's really straightforward, this bit. I have an embroidery thread that matches the colour of the fabric, and I'm just simply going to really firmly and securely sew these into place. So I'm putting a knot at the end of the thread, and I'm going to just start sewing into place. I'm going to go underneath. I'm going to go underneath there first, so the knot goes underneath. And then I'm just all the way along going to just sew into the head and up through the ear. I'll remove that pin, and Make sure it stays lined up, and I'm just going to do that all the way along. So you're going to have quite a stitch look. You can do it with a smaller thread and do it really precisely, but I like it like this. I don't mind the stitch look, and I know that it's really, really secure. So I'm just going to continue down to the bottom. And then at the end, just going to do the last stitch through there. I'm going to do a knot. So I'm just going to loop that through the last stitch, pull it tight. In fact, I'm going to do another one just to be secure. So I'm going to do a stitch through there and then just loop the needle through that loop, pull it tight, and then poke the needle out and bring it out somewhere up here. And then snip that thread, and there we have one little ear in place. So I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Here's my finished elephant doll. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. You can see my little doll's wearing a skirt, a swishy skirt. If you head over to the Etsy store, there's a collection of patterns there to make your elephant his or her wardrobe. They're really easy to follow patterns, so you can make lots of different items to dress him or her up.